this year we've seen an increase in trade union membership and indeed in the number of women who are members of trade unions, which is very, very good. And amongst those who are speaking with us tonight, both Frances O'Grady, who was made the inaugural lecture, and Mary Bousted is here, has been named this week among the top 100 women for outstanding achievements and excellence in Westminster. And indeed, the person who's going to kick off this year's lecture, Angela, has also been named in it. So we really are, it's a great celebration, not just of what Mary Macarthur did, but what her present day sisters have also done in the trade union movement. And it's good to have success, and it's good to have you all with us. Now then, all of you will know Angela. She is the Member of Parliament for Ashton-under-Lyne, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, and an excellent first-class trade unionist. Angela, you came and spoke at our festival some years back, and you've scored a hat-trick, because here you are again now, speaking at the lecture to celebrate not just Mary Macarthur, but the Women Chainmakers of Cradley Heath as well. Angela, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Sylvia. And it's so good to be here. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person to deliver it. But, you know, it's absolutely great to be invited by the Midlands TUC and the TUC to this Mary Macarthur Lecture on the centenary anniversary of her passing. And I'm sorry, like I say, we can't be here in person. And it's great to be sharing the stage with Mary as well, because she's done so much along with Kevin to really push the issues of that's happening in our education system. I'm just really sorry that I'm no longer in that brief anymore, because I was saying I probably would have done a number on that. Gavin is just so bad. He's just really dreadful, and he's not doing anyone any good, including the pupils that deserve better, quite frankly. But the teachers and the support staff have been doing an amazing job. No school's been closed during this pandemic, and the teachers have been doing a sterling job looking after the young people. And I want to put up my thanks to Mary as well. And yes, we might have got onto the 100 Women of Westminster this week. And also this week, I became the Right Honourable and was on the Privy Council. But not only was I excited that it seems a bit weird that I get to do strange stuff like attend the Queen dying to make sure she's dead and see who we get next. That's quite strange. But the reason why I wanted to go on the Privy Council and why I'm so proud to do it is because people will remember back in the 90s when the Tories were in, and I had my son in 96 and I was 16 at the time, and they were saying girls like me were getting pregnant so that we could get council houses. And I remember feeling pretty ashamed of myself at the time, thinking, you know, I was not a good person. And it's took me all these years, quite frankly, to you lot, I'm Ange. But to them Tories that think they're better than me, I'm the Right Honourable Lady. And that's a tribute to all of those girls that are told they're not good enough. And that's what I want to say, first of all, is that Right Honourable is your Right Honourable as well. And that's why I'm proud to take the title, so that they can call me it, but you call me Ange. But I also want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to everyone here tonight who has been working on the front line during this pandemic. You've been at work, putting your lives at risk to save the lives of others and keep us all safe. You really are our country's heroes, and I want to say a massive thank you to all of you. And I'm also honoured to be following the footsteps of Frances O'Grady and Ross Wynne-Jones. Frances is steadfastly fighting on behalf of working people throughout this pandemic, and I'm sure you all agree. And Ross continues her great work exposing social injustice and the exploitation of working people in the gig economy. And you know, Mary firmly rejected the idea that men of any class were superior to working class women. And let me tell you, honestly, sitting opposite Boris Johnson and the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg at Prime Minister's Question confirms it to be absolutely true. And I want to begin by wishing everyone a happy International Women's Day for Monday. And you know, how did Boris Johnson mark International Women's Day? He cut the pay of 1 million women on the front line working in our NHS. And I also want to say something about the death of Sarah Everard. She was walking home. Every woman should be able to walk home free from fear, free from the threat of violence and even death. And I can't believe I have to say that in 2021. And I can't believe that we are still fighting against a culture that blames victims for the violence that is experienced by women every single day. But I do have to say it. And we all have to say it. And we have to keep saying it until we see the change. And tonight, I know all of our thoughts will be with Sarah's family and friends and loved ones who are going through unimaginable grief. And I'm proud to honour the struggles of previous generations of sisters tonight, just as I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with my sisters in the ongoing struggle for equality for all women in the workplace, in public life and in wider society. It is the honour and absolute privilege of my life to be deputy leader of the Labour Party and be the most senior woman in our party and our movement. And of course, with this privilege comes great responsibility. A responsibility to hold the door open so more women can follow after me. A responsibility to make sure women's voices are heard. And a responsibility to build on the work of those women who came before me in order to build a better future for the women who will come after. Sisters, we stand on the shoulders of giants in our movement. Giants like the Match Women, the women of Dagenham, and of course the Chainmakers of Cradley Heath. In laying down their tools to strike for 10 long weeks for a fair wage, not only did the women of Cradley Heath focus attention on low-paid workers and put more than double their own pay, they won a victory for the principle of a minimum wage and laid the foundations for so much that came after. A local dispute became a national campaign, and 88 long years later, it was a Labour government that passed the National Minimum Wage Act. But you know, the work of the women of Chadley Heath is not done, unfortunately. That fight goes on. We are fighting the same fight that previous generations fought before us, for a fair day's pay, for a fair day's work, for the end of poverty wages, and for workers to be treated with dignity and respect. That fight is the same today as it has always been. It's just taken on different forms in the economy and society that we have today. We can draw a straight line from the Chainmakers of Chadley Heath to the care workers fighting today to be paid the minimum wage for the hours that they work. In 1910, the women of Chadley Heath asserted their right to a fair wage. And in 2021, the men and women driving Ubers have to go to the highest court in the land to uphold the law and their right to be treated as workers and to be paid the minimum wage. It was our movement that took that fight on, and our trade union reps doing a remarkable job every single day, many on as a volunteer basis. You know, if Mary was alive today, you can be sure that she would be organising the Amazon warehouse workers on 0-hour contracts who don't even have regular hours so they can feed their families and put food on the table. As Amazon's sales increased by 50% in a year, and the company's founder increased his wealth by $50 billion during the COVID pandemic. The women of Cradley Hill were called the Amazons of the chain yard. Today, we have the chain makers of Amazon, where big businesses are still able to exploit their workers, dodge their moral and legal responsibilities to uphold the law and treat their workers with decency and respect. It was William Morris who said, "Men fight and lose the battle, and other men have to fight for what they meant under another name." He was right, except it is women who have to pick up the torch and carry it forward and continue the fight for what Mary and millions of women like her have fought for. And it is thanks to the women of Cradley Hill and millions more like them that we have a minimum wage. But today, over 100 years on from this strike, we have more than 4 million children growing up in poverty, and 3/4 of them are growing up in working families. In the 5th richest country in the world, we still have an economy defined by poverty wages, starvation wages, working people reliant on food banks, people working a long week and working their fingers to the bone for their poverty and their hunger. And you know, 3 in 4 care workers have been going out to work during this pandemic, putting their lives at risk for less than the living wage. Workers without adequate sick pay, forced to choose between doing the right thing by society to control infections or the right thing by their family to put food on the table. And you know, it feels fitting that we're reflecting on the legacy of this strike this week. The week of International Women's Day, which is also the week where the government has confirmed that they're cutting the pay of our NHS staff. A year into a deadly pandemic during which our NHS staff have put their lives on the line and even lost their lives and sacrificed so much for all of us. And of these NHS staff facing a pay cut, 3 in 4 are women. And women are overrepresented in the lowest paid roles. So make no mistake about it, that this pay cut is an attack on women. After clapping our carers and key workers, the Prime Minister is taking £174 a year out of the pockets of a nurse and £312 a year out of the pocket of a health visitor and £572 a year out of the pocket of a doctor. And you know, at the same time, is giving Dominic Cummings a 40 grand pay rise and giving Matt Hancock's pub landlord £30 million, handing out £2 billion to Tory donors and croners, and another £37 billion for a test and trace system that is failed. All you need is a WhatsApp to be in the Tory group list. This is outrageous use of taxpayers' money. And then asking our NHS staff to foot the bill for their incompetence. As Mary herself put it, women are unorganised because they are badly paid and poorly paid because they are unorganised. What Mary did, though, was to give women a sense of their own identity, dignity and power so they could organise to win higher wages. That is what our movement has always done. And this makes me think back to my own experience in our movement, ever since my workmates from when I was a home help in Stockport put me forward to be their rep. It's our movement that gave me a voice, gave me an education and a vocation. And that's why when I stood at the dispatch box opposite Boris Johnson at Prime Minister's Questions last year, my first question was about low pay in the social care sector. And you know, I can't be at this meeting tonight and not say how proud I am that my union has elected Christina McAnee as the General Secretary, and there couldn't be a better woman to stand up for our key workers. Over the last year, our movement has proved the importance of trade unions and shown the value of having a union membership card in your back pocket. It's our trade union movement that have fought and won the furlough scheme to protect millions of jobs. It's our trade union movement that fought for safety at work because the government failed on PPE and has failed to enforce COVID-safe workplaces. And it's our trade union movement that has fought against fire and rehire to protect jobs and livelihoods. Now, our party was born out of the trade unions. We have always been one movement, and we will always stay that way. I was brought into the Labour Party from the trade unions, and I'll never forget my roots. I was born in Stockport, but raised in the union. And as deputy leader and chair of the Labour Party, this is personal for me. The trade union movement has defined my life, and the values that the trade union movement taught me will define the Labour Party under Keir Starmer and myself. So I want to end where I started, with a struggle for a fair day's pay, for a fair day's work. That struggle goes on. And in the immortal words of Mary Macarthur, beat no iron, blow no bellows till ye win the fight, ensuring pay that is yours due. The lessons of the dispute are the lessons for all time. When working class women win, we all win. When working class people are paid properly, we all benefit. And it is true today as it was when Mary was alive. There can be no progress, and there will be no progress without organising and doing the hard yards. Winning the argument, making the moral case, and popular support are all important, but none of them are enough. What matters, and what has always mattered, is the power of a movement and the power of a coalition for change. And above all else, a Labour government. Because when I was elected as deputy leader of the Labour Party, I was not elected to be deputy leader of the opposition. I was elected to be deputy prime minister of a Labour government to build a fairer, more equal society. And you know, we can't go back to a society where 3/4 of care workers earn less than a living wage, and where the very same NHS heroes who put their lives on the line to save others are rewarded with a pay cut. So on behalf of the women of Chadley Heath, in memory of Mary and all those who have gone before us, the struggle goes on, the cause endures, and it's up to all of us to pick up the mantle.
Thank you, Angela, very much indeed. If ever we doubted that we had a strong woman there as a deputy leader of the Labour Party, you've proved to us all how important it is that you're there and that your voice is heard loud and clear. What comes to mind is that saying that women need trade unions and trade unions need the women. And you are a shining example of how good that has been. Thank you so much, Angela, for that. I'm sure it's given a number of people in the audience the opportunity now to ask you some questions. I'm very fortunate. When Fiona Bruce does question time, she doesn't have an assistant of any kind. I do, actually. And it's my good friend Jenny, who's now going to help and tell us what the questions are to the deputy leader of the Labour Party, an excellent trade unionist, to Ange. Jenny.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Sylvia. One of the questions that's come in is asking about how we protect trade union facility time at the moment when the government are trying to oppress the trade union movement. I don't know whether you want me.
Oh yeah, do you want me to answer that one first and then?
That'd be fab, thank you.
Yeah. I think we've just got to all push together actually to make sure. I mean, I've noticed they've done this a few times, you know, the Tories, especially in my time as a trade union rep, and then they suddenly realised that actually having the trade unions recognised and given facility time is one of the best ways that they can make progress in the organisation. So the clearest example that I can give you on that was when I was doing equal pay in local government. And delivering equal pay in local government meant that we had to negotiate and ensure that we had a job evaluation scheme that was fit for purpose. It was the trade union reps and the facility time awarded to them that prevented local government being completely decimated by the amount of money that they would have had to have given up in terms of being sued for being so incompetent. So actually trade union and facility time is a very prudent move for all employers, because actually it facilitates them being good employers and stops them making really silly mistakes. So that's kind of the argument I put to Tories, because they understand the value. Well, they know the value of nothing, but they know how much it costs in terms of pounds, shilling and pence. So I make that argument, but I'm dead clear that we need to go much further when we get into government. So not only repealing the Trade Union Act and all of the vile legislation that's come forward that I was pushing when I first became an MP to oppose, we've got to go much further in endorsing. That's why I did the Join the Trade Union campaign when I first was elected as deputy, because I absolutely believe that's how you create a better and more equal society. I absolutely believe it in my bones that it's really good for society and it's really good for employers. If employers are scared of trade unions and the trade union facility time, then there's a real problem with that employer, because all the trade unions I've ever worked with have always tried to avoid going on industrial action. They don't want it. Members don't want to lose pay, and they try and work constructively to improve the lives of their workers. And if you've got happy workers, then you usually have a more productive workforce. So I think we've got to make those crude arguments, but in the meantime, but then we've got to have not just any old Labour government, but a Labour government that sees trade unions as a crucial, important part of making society better.
Thank you, Angela. Jenny, any further questions?
Yeah, we've had a question about trade unions being led by women, and also about greater representation of intersectionality, and talking about the celebrations, and I'm going to read it. The recent victories morally of black and brown women, industrial strikes and wins, and the fact that, are we talking about those enough, and are they being represented loudly enough as well?
No, it's my shortest answer to that. We have never done enough, and we still haven't done enough to articulate and to talk about intersectionality and the challenges that are faced when you come across discrimination in multiple ways. So women of colour who suffer multiple discrimination is still not, it's departmentalised, and we aren't talking about it anywhere near enough. I mean, you can see that just this week with what's happened with Megan when she spoke about her experiences, and you can see that in the way it's played itself out. So I think we've got a lot more work to do, and I think it's up to all of us to amplify and make sure that those messages are there, and not just that those messages are there, but the people are in the room that can deliver that authentic message. I don't want someone speaking for me. I want to speak for myself. And I think that's the same for my sisters of colour. They don't want somebody speaking for them. They want to speak for themselves. My job is to amplify their message and ensure that that message gets to a wider audience. And I take that role very serious personally. I've done a lot of work on, the Labour Party's internal structures, but also about how we encourage candidates coming forward. So I did a lot of summer workshops to try and I'm working with the trade unions, and they did a great job in getting more diverse candidates, because I want them in the room. I want people in the room that can talk about their experiences. I've got one experience, but that's mine. I own it. It's not other people's experiences. So you've got to make sure we diversify our movement and get those voices amplified.
Thank you very much, Angela. Jenny, have we any more questions for Angela?
There are a couple more questions, but I know we've actually really only got time for one more, I think. I'd love to ask an education question as an NEU rep, but actually the more general question is about how we encourage more women to become union reps, councillors, MPs, or, all of the different, how is it we engage with women and encourage them to join in with us?
Well, first of all, don't tell them what it entails. Don't let them go on social media. and then just say to them, just tap them on the shoulder. That's the problem with us women in the movement. We don't see ourselves as the answer to it. We always sort of pitch ourselves slightly below where we should be. And I'm guilty of that, as anyone else is. But I think what we've got to do is we've got to try our best to say out loud what we think in our head about other women. So we don't normally say it. So if there's a woman, like I said, Mary's inspired me with the way which she's led on taking forward the issues in the education system, not just for teachers, by the way. Mary doesn't just talk about the teachers, she talks about the children. She talks about the children more than she talks about her members, to be honest. But that's the kind of woman I like. She sees her job as not just a job about supporting her members, but she sees her job as a vocation of how do I create a better environment for those kids that we're looking after. So she inspires me. What we've got to do is we've got to tell women that that's what we think, and we've got to make sure that we encourage them by giving them very, very good direct advice on, you're brilliant, your great attributes are this, and this is how I'm going to help you get to where I think you should be, and my door's open for you. Create a sisterhood. That's what I say.
They sound like excellent slogans, Angela, and I'm going to thank you by quoting yourself back to you, if I may. That's where you were said, I'm in a place achieving things I never dreamed of being able to do. What gives me confidence to do it is knowing I'm speaking up for my class, the people I'm here to represent. And you have certainly showed us that tonight, both in your presentation and the way in which you have responded to those questions. Our heartfelt thanks. And I'm only sorry that we can't be in the room with you, to use your own phrase, so that we could have continued to have a discussion once the meeting finished. Many, many thanks for your time, Angela, and many, many thanks for the work that you're doing for the Labour Party and the trade union movement. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Well, now we're in a very fortunate position because we've got a panel of three, all coming along this evening to speak to us. The first one we've already heard a little bit about, and that's Dr. Mary Bousted. And as I've already said, she's been named this last week, along with Angela, as 2 women in 100 that are making a big difference and are very influential in Westminster. Mary is a joint general secretary of the NEU, but she has lived and breathed education, whether it's at the chalk face, at secondary school, whether it's in university, in management, in leadership, and in working through the not so easy task of bringing 2 important trade unions successfully together, and has been very much in the front line of questions, seeking her advice, seeking her guidance on what has been happening to both staff and children and young people in education. A strong voice there for education, and it's a great pleasure, Mary, to ask you to come and address us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, and good evening, everyone. Delighted to be here, delighted to be on this panel tonight. So, and thank you to the TUC Midlands for inviting me to participate in the Mary Macarthur Annual Lecture. And, you know, I knew about Mary Macarthur, obviously, but I did some more research for this, this event. And, you know, what a life Mary lived, rebelling against her Tory family, converted by socialists, describing the dire conditions faced by low-paid workers. She brought the horrific realities of women's lives in sweatshops to national attention. She founded the National Federation of Women Workers and was a brilliant speaker who could have convinced young, uneducated, exploited women of the need to be in a union. She used to say that if they earned more, they could buy nicer clothes. And that was despised, first of all, until other socialists realised that you have to start where people are at and get them interested, and then they might listen to you further and then might take action. And as Angela said, she said, while women are badly paid because of their unorganised condition, they remain unorganised because they are badly paid. And that speaks to the role of unions, and particularly now the role of unions to represent the low paid, and in particular women, low paid workers. Now in 1911, a year after the Chainmakers strike, Mary moved to London and to where I live now, in Bermondsey, to rouse the factory workers from starvation wages. And she led 2,000 of them in successful strikes. And when I go round Bermondsey, I can see the old factory buildings, which are now, of course, converted. They're now they were sweatshops. They're now highly desirable in converted office spaces and converted flats, which sell for millions of pounds. But the roots of those buildings are in sweatshop and unorganised labour and starvation and poverty pay. And Mary was in Bermondsey in 1911, organising the factory workers. So she was a tour de force. She made things happen. She made the weather. Now in 2021, the majority of trade union members are women. But I do think we have to ask ourselves, is the trade union movement a place where women's voices are properly heard and where they're properly amplified? Are unions' organising structures open enough to women? And are there enough women leaders in the movement? I mean, it is wonderful to see my good friend and sister, Christina McInerney, as the woman leader of Unison, the woman general secretary of Unison. And it's fantastic that my good friend and sister, Frances O'Grady, leads the TUC as general secretary so brilliantly. But I think we have to ask the question, are trade union campaigns and industrial demands, are they forged with women in mind? And could trade unions say today, as we stand in solidarity and sorrow with Sarah Everard's family and friends, could we say that unions are always safe places for women, free of bullying, harassment and violence? And I think these are difficult questions. Difficult because whilst unions rightly and proudly campaign for women's equality, and in this year it's the TUC and Unison and unions who've brilliantly exposed just how women have suffered in COVID, more likely to lose their jobs, to be paid less, and much more likely to be doing the childcare and the homeschooling as well as working. So despite this magnificent work, there is evidence, I'm afraid, that unions don't always practice women's equality or race equality or other equalities, what Angela was talking about, intersectionality, within their own structures. We try, but sometimes we are found wanting. And independent reports into union cultures released this year are testimony to that. And I think we have to take this seriously and be honest about it, because when you are honest, then you can act, and action is needed, not only in society, not only in government, not only in the law, not only by the police, but also in our unions to really empower women. But things can change, and I want to talk now a little about my union, the National Education Union, the union that Kevin and I are proud to be joint general secretaries of. And this year has been extraordinary for the union and for me personally. I realised this week that there has been one central organising principle in my life for a whole year, and it has been COVID and the union's response to COVID and its ability to defend, protect and organise our members. So when COVID struck, the key question for the NEU was how to organise and communicate with members in a pandemic. And the National Education Union was clear that our members needed us. 76 of the NEU members are women, 76% of NEU members are women working in schools and colleges. And uniquely amongst professionals, they are required to work in very crowded buildings with no social distancing, inadequate PPE or no PPE, and inadequate ventilation. And as the science of COVID became clearer and the NEU followed the science, it became obvious that whilst children are extremely unlikely to become very ill with COVID, they can transmit the virus to each other and out into the community and to the adults working with them in schools and colleges. And this increasing knowledge of the transmission of COVID caused huge concern amongst our members. Now, the NEU's response was that we had to be where our members were, which was not in meetings in person, because they weren't, apart from teaching vulnerable children and key worker children, they were doing remote learning at home. So we had to be in their homes, we had to be visible to them, and we had to communicate with them. And so began our journey, using new technology to organise, communicate and democratise the NEU. We pioneered Zoom meetings for members, and on the 18th of May last year, we held a Zoom meeting for 20,000 members. We thought that was incredible. We thought it was probably one of the biggest or the biggest union organised meeting that had ever taken place. But that was completely dwarfed on the 3rd of January this year, the day before primary teachers and support staff and leaders throughout England were being ordered by Boris Johnson and Gavin Williamson back to school at the height of the pandemic, with soaring infection rates, soaring hospitalisation rates, and with a new variant that was up to 50% more transmissible. On January 3rd, we held a Zoom meeting for members, which we streamed simultaneously on YouTube. 100,000 teachers and lecturers and support staff and the public watched for a full hour. A further 300,000 watched part of the Zoom. So that's 400,000 in total. And we're clear it's the biggest union organised political event ever. We took the members on that 3rd of January call through the scientific evidence and advised them that if they, as we, considered that they were being asked to work in an unsafe, required, not asked, required to work in an environment which was a direct threat to their health and safety, that they should use Section 44 under the 1996 Employment Act to protect themselves, and that their union would support them in doing that. We had a letter, model letter, for the members to send to their heads ready, and it was dropped into the chat function on the Zoom call with a web link. So the letter was there immediately for the members, and we made it clear that signing this letter was an individual decision, otherwise it's illegal industrial action. But the letters could be signed jointly, so members could individually send a joint letter to their head. We also had frequently asked questions, model letters to MAT CEOs, model letters to local authorities, a whole panoply of support for members, which we spent the Christmas and New Year's holiday developing. And we directed members to our website. Now we've developed that system of communication. Now when we do Zooms, we text the materials that we launch during the meeting to our members' phones. We find there's a much bigger opening rate for that. So we're constantly looking at ways of increasing the engagement and the communication to members. By the end of Monday evening, Monday the 4th of January, 7,000 model letters on Section 44 have been downloaded from our website, but many more were sent because the letters were sent to, one rep downloaded them, sent them to other reps, members downloaded them, sent them to other members, and between school groups. And we started getting emails from around the country about emails from heads who on Sunday evening were closing their schools to in-person teaching, not to vulnerable and key worker children. It remained open to them because they did not have the staff to run them. On Monday, the 4th of January, at 8 o'clock, Boris Johnson made the announcement that schools would close. This was on the advice of Chris Whitty, his chief medical officer, but I am clear that the NEU was a strong element in forcing that decision to the forefront of his mind. And we have evidence now that so many of the Section 44 letters were signed by the whole school staff that a quarter of primary teachers, overwhelmingly women, often young, often very nervous about taking industrial action or very nervous about taking action to protect themselves, a quarter of primary teachers had signed Section 44 letters and refused to work in an environment which was an imminent danger to their health and safety. Now, as I've said, primary teachers are not our most militant members, but they signed and they acted in the way to protect themselves and their pupils and their community. And here's the thing, during the course of this year, since March, the NEU has increased its membership by over 36,000 members. Now, that's a great thing, increasing your membership, but more important is the increase in our rep base. We have increased our rep base by 12% during the course of this year. 72% of our new reps are women. 38% are under 35. 65% of these new reps work in primary schools, where we've always found it more difficult to recruit reps, because paradoxically, the smaller the workplace, the more difficult it is to be the one who sticks your head over the parapet. But 38%, 65% of the new reps work in primary schools. 7% of the new reps are Black, which compares to 3% before the lockdown. So we've doubled the number of Black reps and we've doubled the number of LGBT+ reps as well. We've recruited 800 health and safety reps. Now, before lockdown, they were overwhelmingly predominantly white and older and male, but 70% of the health and safety reps we recruited in lockdown are women. And when we took part, Kevin did this in a Zoom call with Jessie Jackson about Black Lives Matter. We got 400 Black members who went on that call, who then volunteered to become reps, and we've recruited 300 of them. So really increased the rep base, increased the women's rep base, and increased the diversity in our union. Women, Black members, LGBT+ members, disabled members. We've got more disabled reps, more women who are part-time are reps, and they are the face, the voice, the eyes and ears. They make the union live in the workplace. And unions don't live because of general secretaries. They don't live because of the work done in Whitehall. They live because of the work done school by school, college by college, where the union is real, alive and visible to the members. So in a pandemic, without the ability to meet face to face, we have transformed the union and transformed representation within the union. And there's something else. Our new reps work differently. Deprived of face-to-face meetings in schools and colleges, they're using WhatsApp groups to communicate with their members, and they communicate with other members of other reps in their multi-academy trust or the local authority. And increasingly, they are confidently sharing ideas, answering each other's questions, and sharing good practice, and crucially, wins in the workplace. And so we see a new spirit abroad in the union, and we no longer apologise for asking reps to do something. As soon as they become a rep, we offer them online training. So there's no waiting until the next term for the most wonderful training course. They get basic, but very good, immediate online training. And that's essential. And then we say 4 things to them. Hold a meeting with your members, set up a WhatsApp group, make a connection with your local branch, and arrange a meeting with your heads after the school meeting so you can negotiate with the head about the issues that members care about. And the reps, overwhelmingly young and female, have done all of these things and made the NEU visible and alive in their schools. It's been an amazing act of women's empowerment. And you know, don't you, that power is very addictive. Once you have a taste of it, you want more. So we're not going to revert to the past when we get out of lockdown and back to a more normal life. We are going to continue to organise and communicate and campaign in ways which enable our members, 76% of women, who as teachers work over 50 hours a week, and the vast majority have caring responsibilities. We are going to continue to support ways for them to become active and organised in their union. We will continue to be compelling, to be urgent, and to be essential, because our members expect that of us, and we will not let them down. Women are the face, the eyes, the ears, the voice of the NEU, and we are going to work to make that voice stronger as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, very much. What an amazing information that you've given to us, and how, despite our sort of fears and concerns about COVID and the impact on education, you've showed us there are some positives that have come out of it as well. And you've taken that opportunity and you've used that to build up your union, not just for now, but as you've quite rightly said, for the future, by making sure it is diverse, by giving your members the resources they need to go out and fight. What more can we ask of a trade union than to do just that? Now, I think you've said so much. I was going to say, I'm sure that there are plenty of questions, but I'm just going to ask our audience to be a little bit patient, because there's 2 other panelists, first of all, to speak, and then they'll be getting their questions ready for you. Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our second panelist this evening really needs little introduction to members in Cradley Heath and the Friends of the Chainmakers and people in this area, because Dr. Cathy Hunt, who's our next panelist, spoke at the Women Chainmakers Festival, which is held in July. She's known as a historian. In particular, she's done a lot of work on the situation in women in Coventry, the history of the city there, but also a very authoritative voice on Mary Macarthur and the women that she organised. And in addition to focusing on what Mary achieved with the Women Chainmakers, Cathy has, in her book, Righting the Wrong, she has shown even more to Mary than her skills in organising the Women Chainmakers of Cradley Heath. She's shown us that Mary had far more strings to her bow than just that, and that is no mean feat in itself. And that is certainly important. And she has, in her words, said, I have tried to walk in her shoes. And those of you who have yet to read her book, Righting the Wrong, then I can assure you, when you've read that, you will understand exactly what she meant and know even more about our heroine, Mary Macarthur. It's with great pleasure I ask Cathy Hunt to address us. Cathy.
Thank you very much. Okay, so well, I'm the history one then. So because I'm going to talk about a little bit about Mary in the past, there are actually some slides that somebody's got that's going to put up for me. So you don't have to look at me, you can look at my slides instead. Because the very first thing that I want to do is to introduce the TUC's exhibition, which commemorates the life of Mary Macarthur, who, as Angela said, died 100 years ago this year, aged just 40. She was one of the most impressive and effective trade union leaders the British Labour movement has ever seen. It highlights her remarkable life and the development of the all-female union that she founded in 1906, the National Federation of Women Workers. Next slide, please. I know I sound a bit like a public broadcast, but there you go. And it was wonderful to be able to showcase some of the wealth of material held by the TUC library and to be able to curate this exhibition about this outstanding woman. And my hope for the exhibition is that it will prove to be a useful resource for unions and for schools seeking to find out more about the ways women have been organised in the past, and hopefully a way of linking our union lives, past, present and future, all together. So Angela spoke earlier of the dignity and the power that Mary Macarthur gave to women. So what I want to do this evening is just say a few words about Mary Macarthur's union and what it was, how Mary Macarthur envisaged the future for women workers. Next slide, please. Because the National Federation of Women Workers was a unique experiment in the history of the British Labour movement. It was founded in 1906 by Mary Macarthur, formally merging into the National Union of General Workers, which had been the gas workers and is now the GMB, 100 years ago on the 1st of January 1921. And that was the very day that Mary Macarthur died. She'd spent the last year of her life shoring up the future of her influential but small all-female union, making sure that the work that it had started and the gains that it had secured in pay and conditions continued into the post-First World War world. Next slide, please. What was that work? Essentially, that work was to organise women into some of the worst paid jobs in the country. Jobs in which there was no other union to join, often in industries where it was traditionally thought that it was pointless to try to recruit women workers. And these were laundry workers, metal workers, box makers, as we have here on the slide, metal workers, garment workers, jam and sweet makers, chain makers. Those, in other words, who were the most hidden and the most exploited. The Federation fought some pretty good fights, and its members showed the world that they were not to be messed with. Next slide, please. Here we have a series of postcards produced by the Federation to raise funds for women box makers in South London. And here they're out on strike against proposed pay cuts in 1908. I just love these photographs. They show that Mary Macarthur had a real eye for the theatrical, but it was for showing the world what was going on. And here you can see her leading the women into Trafalgar Square, into central London for a rally in Trafalgar Square. And you've got strikers up there on the plinth, you've got Mary, you've got well-known politicians side by side and closely observed by the gentleman of the press on the right-hand side of the top photograph. And as others have said, as Mary said, Mary Macarthur was by all accounts a brilliant communicator. "Keep on, miss," yelled one young worker at a woman worker at an outdoor meeting. "It's better than the seaside." Next slide, please, because here we have Mary again in Cradley Heath. the scene of perhaps the most famous strike that her union was involved in, that Angela mentioned at the beginning, securing a minimum wage for women chainmakers in 1910, after brave and sustained strike action by the women workers. That the women of Mary Macarthur's Federation also proved themselves to be excellent trade unionists was in no small part due to a brilliant team of union activists, paid and unpaid. Next slide, please. Because Mary Macarthur knew that simply recruiting women members was never going to be enough. Women in the most successful branches of the Federation learned how to be strong members, to recognise what Mary Macarthur meant when she talked about the organised workers as a bundle of sticks, as opposed to the single twigs which could be picked off and snapped by the employer. Successful branches like this one in Coventry needed everyone to take their part. They needed committed activists. They needed support from Federation organisers in London so that branches didn't feel abandoned after a strike. And they needed as much contact as possible amongst members, which was so important when women were working in precarious jobs, on lousy contracts, and at the mercy of unscrupulous bosses, isolated, sometimes working in their homes. And social events were a great way of bringing everyone together, those in factories, those working in isolation from others, be it churning out goods at home. So branch outings, dances, whist drives were all really popular ways of getting together and strengthening bonds. Now, Mary Macarthur never saw the future of women's trade unionism as separatist. Instead, she likened her federation to a school where women could become confident members, get the hang of meeting etiquette and rules, and once that was achieved, then her federation would be ready to move, as it did, into a mixed gender union and organise side by side with men. Whilst both unskilled and semi-skilled men and women workers were all relatively new to trade unionism, I think it's fair to say that men had more freedom and crucially time to get up to speed, and perhaps more confidence to speak up at meetings. Life was tough for all workers in the early 20th century, but women, of course, had to deal with the double shift, getting home to look after the family, whereas men maybe could more easily squeeze in a branch meeting in the pub after work. Far too often, women workers had either been ignored by men or they'd been regarded with hostility as competition for jobs at the factory gates and then blamed for undercutting the men's wages. Next slide, please. Because women didn't just have this as a barrier to joining the union, they also had to find the subs out of very low wages. And they had to deal with intimidation and victimisation from employers who did not expect women to stand up to them. They expected women to defer to them, to be grateful for having a job. And it was why safe meeting places like this, the Workers' Institute in Cradley Heath, which is now being relocated to the Black Country Living Museum, which incidentally was built with funds left over from the chainmakers strike. Imagine that. This was built with funds left over. That's how good Mary Macarthur was at fundraising and communicating and getting the information out there. Places like this one were hugely important, allowing workers to keep in touch, not just with the union, but with each other. And as I said, that was always so much harder for women members, for whom the pub or the club was never really a realistic option, even if they did have time to go between leaving work and going home to start the chores. Next slide, please. And finally then, a very short tribute to the women's extraordinary leader, Mary Macarthur, who died 100 years ago. She was born in Glasgow in 1880 to a fairly affluent middle-class family, but she appears never to have been hampered in her union work by not sharing a background with the women she set out to organise. And this, I think, was because she had such a great ability to communicate, to captivate audiences, and to gain their respect. And she did all this, I think, because she got it, she understood it. She never took chances with any one woman's future, but instead she pressed home the importance of protection, of sticking together, and emphasising what could be achieved with solidarity. Next slide, please. In the first edition of The Woman Worker, the union newspaper she founded in 1907. I mean, we have to remember this was a woman who never stopped still. She had so much going on. She worked so hard. And you can read this newspaper in the TUC library. But she talked in its first edition of the importance of binding women together in what she described as friendship and unity. And I've always really loved that. And I think that was at the heart of the work of her National Federation of Women Workers. Last slide, please. Because I do urge you, if you can, to have a look at the exhibition at the TUC. It really seeks to capture the essence of who Mary Macarthur was, the importance of her work, and its continued relevance for women workers today. And if you want to know a bit more, then you can check out my website for details of the biography that I was delighted to be able to write on Mary Macarthur, Righting the Wrong, and my history of her union, the National Federation of Women Workers. Thank you so much for having me tonight. What an absolute privilege it has been. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy, both for your work in terms of writing that book and giving us an even broader picture of Mary and her achievements, but also for the time and the effort that you have put into that exhibition, which is crucial. It's there for us all to see and to take note of. And I'm quite sure that many of us will now be able to go ahead and do just that. I want finally to ask our final panelist this evening, and that's Sarah James. Sarah's got responsibility for equality at a national level within the GMB. She's also involved in driving forward equality at the region under the GMB's BOSS group. And as if that isn't enough, at the grassroots level, Sarah is very much involved. She's got a reputation for being a very powerful and articulate advocate for equality and justice in the locality here where she's working in Sandwell. Sarah, a very big welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and what a platform to be sharing with some amazing women in the trade union and labour movement tonight. And it's just a privilege to be able to speak to everyone watching tonight. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the Chainmakers, coming from the area where the Chainmakers worked and lived. And I'm going to start with saying a bit of an admittance, really, that before I was involved in the trade union movement, before I became a member and was elected into the various panels that Sylvia has spoken about, I had never ever heard of Mary Macarthur or the Chainmakers. Although I only grew up 20 minutes away by car. And this is an all too familiar comment that I've heard from people in the local area over, especially the past few years and so. And every time I hear it, it becomes clearer to me. We don't know our own history. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about the Chainmakers and the history of chainmaking in the Black Country. So at the beginning of the 20th century, 90% of all chain workshops in England and Wales were situated in and around the Black Country. And although they had started declining by 1910, there were 3,500 chain makers, and 2/3 of these workers were women. The chain making women worked for long hours and for piecework rates. often with their children alongside them, or heavily pregnant, hand-hammering chains for domestic use. Now, chain making in the Black Country had started to receive attention from the government in the early 1900s, with the idea being discussed to regulate wages to improve the lives of workers. But throughout negotiations to establish a better wage, the employers complained that higher wages would make them vulnerable to foreign competition and would encourage faster modernisation and result in job losses. Does this sound familiar? It could be any negotiation taking place in any workplace or indeed at any government board level today. But in 1909, the British government passed the Trade Boards Act, which allowed boards to establish a minimum wage for particular trades, most notably chain making, ready-made tailoring, paper box making, and the machine-made lace trade. But unfortunately, not all companies willingly agreed to these new wages, as you've heard. In the spring of 1910, a minimum wage of 2.5 per hour was proposed. And the rate, although a low wage, would double the wage of the women workers and was agreed within this nationally agreed organised trades board. And the employers, however, almost immediately tried to find loopholes in this agreement. And they managed to get a 6-month delay, during which they sent managers to get the women to contract out of the minimum wage. Now, many of the women chainmakers had no formal education, rendering them illiterate, and those who refused to sign the forms were told there would be no work for them. But on the 23rd of August 1910, the National Federation of Women Workers demanded that this minimum wage be paid immediately. The employers refused, and the union, led by Mary Macarthur, called for a strike for all of those women on less than minimum wage. At a mass meeting of women workers, they all agreed not to sign the form. But the chainmaker strike wasn't easy to organise, and as we'd heard already from Cathy, more than half of the women on strike hadn't joined a union because of the cost to join. The weekly payment of 3p could buy a loaf of bread. Food poverty was a real issue for women in 1910, and it's shocking that in 2021 we are still faced with this issue. Recently in Parliament, politicians have had to argue to stop cuts to universal credit that so many people have relied upon throughout this pandemic. And we've all seen those shocking pictures that went through social media of some companies providing what they believe to be decent meals for school children. As we've heard already, at the time, Mary said that women were unorganised because they are badly paid and poorly paid because they are unorganised. But tired of working day and night for starvation wages, these women voted to come out and stay out. And it was reported that at that time, 700 women put down their tools. But the employers didn't expect this strike to go on for long. They knew how little the women were paid, and that would mean going without meant hunger. Mary, aware of the need for money if the chainmakers were not to be starved back to work, threw her energies into raising enough funds to pay the strikers. Now, Mary had a passion for writing, and in particular journalism, and she knew that using the media of the day, she would be able to promote the cause by putting workers' stories at the forefront of the struggle, much like many of the campaigns run by the trade union movement today. She used photographs of the oldest and frailest workers who were dressed in rags with chains strewn around their necks. And the oldest and maybe most famous of these chainmakers was Patience Round. At the time of the strike, she was 79 years old and had been making chain for 67 years. Attending a meeting with Mary was the first time she had left Cradley Heath in her life, even though that meeting only took place a mile down the road. When interviewed, Patience said, "These are wonderful times. I never thought I should live to assert the rights of women. It has been the week of my life, 3 meetings and such beautiful talking." And bearing in mind, this was prior to women winning the vote. And I say women winning the vote in 1928, when suffrage was universal. In cinemas across the country, people watched newsreels about the progress of the strike via the Pathé News Agency. And this was the first strike in Britain to be shown in cinemas. This, along with the strikers protesting on the streets, where women collected funds daily outside of churches and football grounds, helped to generate the much needed cash to support the striking workers. Over £4,000, which equivalent in today's money would be around about £500,000. Mary threw her heart, body and soul into the Women Chainmakers cause. She helped to organise the strike, attended daily picket duties, chaired meetings and arranged fundraising events. She sounds like a charismatic leader and attracted enormous attention from all walks of society, even the likes of George Cadbury. On the 22nd of October, 10 weeks after the strike began, Mary, who was referred to by many of the women as the angel of the workers, addressed a mass meeting in Cradley Heath and declared that the new minimum wage of 11 shillings a week had been secured. Those women had won 100% pay rise, and I can only imagine what it must have been like to be there on that day. Now, when we talk about women's their pay rising by over 100%, to put it into perspective, women's wages rose from 5 shillings a week to 11 shillings a week. A dozen eggs cost 1 shilling, and the average rent at the time was 3 shillings a week. Now, small chain making was the first industry to obtain minimum wage legislation, and as Angela started at the beginning of this lecture this evening, we do really stand on the shoulders of giants, and we should all look back on this campaign and this strike with pride. So, reflecting on the strike and looking forward to the future, what lessons are there for us in the 21st century? Times have changed and our lives are so much better now, or are they? Over a century after desperately poor and overworked women workers in a small town in the middle of the West Midlands said enough is enough, stood up and took action to improve their lives, women still suffer disproportionately in the workplace. And we still hear those appalling stories of workers' conditions at well-known multinational companies, and we can only imagine what it's like in small, unorganised workplaces. Women today have swapped one set of chains for another. Almost 1 million people on zero-hour contracts, our teachers and teaching assistants providing money out of their own pockets to feed children arriving to school without a meal in their stomach, and to provide menstrual products to enable girls to get an education that so many could only dream of about in the early 1900s. It is shocking that in 2021, we are still faced with issues like food poverty, unequal wages, astonishingly long shifts, lack of breaks, an absence of real childcare, and 1 in 2 women are sexually harassed in the workplace. And as our attention has been brought again to this subject this week, harassment in and out of the workplace is a very real and dangerous threat. And I would like to echo at this point Angela's words and pass on my solidarity and that of the whole of the GMB to the family and friends of Sarah Everard. In my own organising area, I regularly see the struggles faced by working women, whether it be fighting against low pay, rallying members to stand up to bosses over health and safety issues, and those employers trying to individualise the workforce. While I see this on a daily basis, the lessons that Mary has taught me ring true and form the basis of my own organising. The 3 E's. Engaging. Mary was a great speaker and knew how to talk to workers and to see the benefit of unions. She also knew how to talk to employers and those she needed to gather support from. Education. Many of the women that Mary organised could not read or write. And today, many of us are educated, but so many do not know their rights at work. Education is such a powerful tool. And empowerment. It was said that Mary gave women through a union the tools to make things better for themselves. Leadership is not always about having the loudest voice, but helping others find their own. And whilst Mary's name will be forever linked to the Women Chainmakers, we must never forget the thousands of women who have put down their physical and metaphorical hammers, or as the Cradley Heath Chainmakers said, their hammers, and broke the chains forged by inequality. The women's struggle inspired a generation, and it is still a powerful tale 100 years on. After many successful years of representing women, the NFWU merged with the National Union of General Workers in 1921 to form a union for both men and women workers. In the belief that class solidarity was more important than separate women's organisations, Mary Macarthur wrote, "Inside the National Union, we shall be able to demonstrate the possibility of a great industrial organisation of men and women, and have one in which women are not submerged, but one in which they take as active part as men." Mary had long argued that the existence of a women-only union was never intended to be a permanent solution to the refusal of some unions to accept women into membership. And the Federation of Women Workers was never hostile to mixed unions and encouraged women workers to join unions appropriate to their work. And it was the ultimate goal to bring women into the union movement and make change within existing organising, a central reason for the merger with the GMB, and we can only imagine what she would have done had she have lived. Under the motto, "You cannot afford to stand alone," the National Union of General Workers continued to support workers in low-paid jobs and ensured they received pay increases to match the rate of inflation. Now, I started saying that I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know Mary's story of that of the Chainmakers. But as I've wrote tonight's speech and I've learnt more about Mary and spoke to as many people as I can about her, it's dawned upon me that I shouldn't be embarrassed. Working class history, and that especially of women, is a deliberate attempt to write us out of the history books. But I hope by listening to and hearing a little bit about Mary and the Chainmakers, we can all learn from and honour the fearless women who have paved the way for us to have the rights we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, very much for managing to compare the circumstances that the women in Cradley Heath faced and the issues that faced them. And you brought it up to the 21st century by drawing that analogy with the situation that women are facing today and the importance, once again, of being a member of a union. Now, we always hear in education the importance of the 3 R's, but you've reminded us of the importance of the 3 E's as far as trade unions are concerned: engaging with people, education and empowerment. Thank you very much indeed, Sarah, for that. Excellent. We're now going to come to the section of the meeting where there's an opportunity if people who have joined us and who are listening to this lecture, if they have questions that they would like to put to any of the panelists, please do so. And I'm once again going to have to rely on my excellent assistant, Jenny. Jenny, have we got any questions for our panelists, either for one or two of them in particular or for all 3? Jenny?
We have, thank you. We've got some quite specific questions. So I think if we could start with those. So one for Mary. In an ideal world, what would you want to see from an education secretary?
Oh God, well, not the one we've got at the moment.
Quick answer.
That's just, I'd like to see an education secretary who's informed and who informs themselves about the issues. And, you know, obviously, I would much prefer that if it was a Labour education secretary, obviously, for the Labour Party. But it's not impossible. I mean, I have to say that Justine Greening, Tory education secretary, was good within her own, you know, ideology, which is limited. She took a very, very dysfunctional department, turned it around and asked what works. So what I just really like at the moment, let me not set this too high. Let me just say I'd like an education secretary who was vaguely competent.
That's a very concise reply. Thank you, Mary. I don't know whether either of the other panelists, whether Sarah or Cathy, would like to add anything, but that was really specific to Mary, but they may have their ideas of what kind of dream education secretary they'd like to see. Okay, we'll move swiftly on. Jenny, further questions?
I just know that Sarah would be agreeing with Mary's comment there because we work together. So anyway, right. So we've got a question for Cathy from a fellow chainmaker author, Tony. So how important was Mary's ability to not only organise women workers, but organise to win for advancing the cause of women workers? And what would be the best thing both female and male trade unionists could do to build upon Mary's legacy today? And I get the feeling that's one for everybody, but particularly for Cathy initially. Oh, obviously he starts with, your book is brilliant, Cathy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. I think Mary Macarthur was always very keen, as Sarah said, for men and women to organise together. And I think she was very strong on union branches staying strong together. It was, you know, it was very hard sometimes. Once, as I alluded to, once a strike was over and organisers who'd kind of zoomed in from London or wherever had gone away again, it was no good if there wasn't anybody there who was able to keep the branches together. So she wasn't very keen for everybody to be able to do that and make sure that there was strong branch secretary and president, etc. But the women took the responsibility for keeping the branch going. And very often it was trades councils or local male trade unions, even if they'd excluded women or their leadership excluded women, it was really important for there to be a pulling together. And the Federation did get a lot of support from men in the local labour movements. So I think in answer to that question, really, it was a question of making sure that everybody stayed strong together, that there was loads and loads of contact between organisers, activists and grassroots members, and that nobody was left to feel isolated and alone, and that the message of the union was reinforced again and again and again. And I think that was done by the women themselves, because Mary Macarthur kind of encouraged pride in the union. So when I mentioned social events earlier, you know, it may have sounded a trivial point, but it was a really important safe space for women to be able to come together and feel that sense of binding together in friendship and unity that Mary Macarthur talked about.
Thank you, Cathy. Mary, have you got anything you'd like to add to that? Right, Sarah? No. Okay, well, moving on. Lots of questions coming up. Jenny, can we have another question then, please?
Yeah, there's one on here that was asked at an event that we held last week as well. So I think I'm going to fire this one over to Sarah. Mary Macarthur encouraged women to meet outside of mixed branch meetings to support, organise and help boost their confidence before a main mixed meeting. Do you think that's something that could be returned to today to help women become more engaged and involved in the unions?
Definitely. I think that we all need to have meetings where we're talking to our brothers in the movement, but we also need to have those safe spaces as women where we can talk about the issues that affect us. So I know myself and Jenny, we've been doing quite a lot of work in Sandwell around the issue of domestic abuse, serious poverty and the menopause, and we need to have those confidence building safe spaces today that we can share our experiences and be able to challenge and speak up, and also lend our support to one another. If you're sitting in a meeting or a branch meeting, you go to your branch meetings if you are a union member, or even in your workplace, and you see or hear one of your sisters being mansplained, or somebody else has had the great idea that a woman next to you has said 5 minutes ago, it's making sure that you've got each other's back, and as you say, that friendship and unity, Cathy, I think that is so important. But also remembering that a lot of the men in our movement as well will support us, but they need to be educated, and it does come back to that whole point of educating, engaging, empowering each other.
Thank you, Sarah. Either of the other panelists? No? Right, we'll move on. Any more questions therefore? I think we're still all right for time. Jenny, have you got any further questions?
Yeah, there's a general one actually that everybody could join in with, which is what challenges do each of the panelists see in the next few years, and what do you think the union responses should be?
Right. Sarah, would you like to kick off with that one?
Yeah, I fear that the challenges that we face today, the challenges that we faced 100 years ago, are still going to be the same challenges going forward, unless we have people around us that will challenge stereotypes, that will challenge workplaces. And I think it's keen that this year's International Women's Day theme was choose to challenge. And I think we all need to choose to challenge, but more than that, we need to challenge to change perceptions of women trade unionists as unions as a whole, and also to challenge each other to be better and to speak out and support each other.
Thank you, Sarah. Mary.
So thank you. I think it's a really interesting question. It sort of it causes me to reflect, really. It causes me to think about things. So it's a very interesting sort of lived experiment between Kevin and myself, because we're joint general secretaries. That's because the union merged, ATL and the NUT we merged, and I was general secretary of ATL and Kevin general secretary of the NUT. And we both recognise that when the monstering is to be done in the Daily Mail, and when the banner headlines are to come out, that I disproportionately get it. I'm the one who's disproportionately monstered in the Mail. In fact, Kevin tweeted about it about a month ago. He said about Andrew Pierce, who's a columnist in the Daily Mail, who's written 2 scurrilous columns about me. He actually called him out on Twitter and said, "Why do you just keep going at Mary? Are you a misogynist?" So I think you know that if you stick your head above the parapet as a woman, particularly a woman of the left, and particularly a woman trade union leader, then you are going to get, you are not going to get a fair press from most of the media. And I think also in International Women's Week, I think also about a report that the NEU did with UK Feminista 2 years ago called "It's Just About Everywhere," which was looking at girls' experience in schools. And what that report found through a very extensive survey was that girls expected to be routinely sexually harassed in school. They expected name-calling. Over a quarter had experienced unwanted sexual touching in school. And when girls go into school, which should be a safe place for them, they run the gauntlet of having to square that circle of being a girl and being able to do something, either good at sport or good at a particular subject. And whenever they put their head above the parapet and show what they can do, they run the risk of being humiliated and denigrated, because boys are not being taught, and our curriculum is not allowing the girls and boys to learn about mutually respectful relationships, about the appalling legacy of misogyny, which is so real in our society. And we know that sexual harassment and violence is on a continuum. It's, name calling to violence against women. All of that's on a continuum. So have we really made the progress that we think we've made? Yes, we have in some ways, but what we have to remember is that discrimination of and hatred against women is like ground elder. It always comes back, and that's because it's about power. And until we get to a society where women have equal power to men, and I am not afraid at all as a woman of saying that I want power. I want power of my own life. I want power to hear my opinions heard, and I want power to be able to make changes and to change the way that women have to be in the world. Women and girls have to be in the world. And so we face the issues in a different context. We're not chain makers, but we are 0-hour contract workers. We are exploited, and we're still expected to do the majority of the childcare, the majority of the housework, and just to pick up the pieces of the world. And until we teach boys and men to share that and to value the experiences and the contribution of women, then we are not going to get the society that they deserve. And we limit their lives as well. It doesn't help boys and men. to denigrate women.
Thank you, Mary, for that, again, very comprehensive reply and some strong messages there for all of us who were able to hear what you have to say this evening. Cathy, have you a comment that you'd like to make, please?
Just a brief one, really. Going back to the question of challenges, I think I would say that the biggest challenge, it remains that there are too many hidden workers. We might think that that's not the case. That, you know, we were talking in 1908, 1909 about those who were, you know, kind of hidden away, too hard to organise. But there are still, you know, they're still there. They're still there working on horrendous contracts, as Angela was saying at the beginning, with no holiday pay, with no sick pay, and nobody, you know, we don't. The whole of society, the whole doesn't notice, doesn't see. There are so many women doing jobs that are hidden. I mean, you know, like cleaners who have gone by the time you get to to your office or to your hotel. It's, you know, there's a whole hidden army of people who aren't recognised, who are still struggling, and who still need to be reached and remembered. And that's the sadness of you know, that we're 100 years on and we're still having to talk like this. I would love us to be in a position to be giving the Mary Macarthur Lecture 100 years after Mary Macarthur's death by saying, you know, God, it was awful then, wasn't it? Life was terrible. It was, you know, and you're right, you know, Sarah, when you say we have made progress, things have got better, but they haven't got better enough, and they certainly haven't got better enough for the, you know, for the people that Mary Macarthur was organising for then. And you're right, she would be all over social media, but that's, you know, that's what that's the challenge to us all. We cannot let those women remain hidden. There can be no hidden workers.
Thank you, Cathy. And you've all reminded us of the importance, not just of women being members of trade unions, but of reminding women of the value that they do with their work, much of which, as you said, Cathy, is hidden. And important for us to continue holding these events to remind ourselves of what Mary Macarthur did, and as equally important, what the women of Cradley Heath did in following her, and the importance and the value of the trade unions. I'm extremely grateful to the TUC and the affiliated trade unions for ensuring that these events continue year after year. They were hidden away for far too long, and now we've got 3 events a year established to remind people of the value. They must continue. They really must continue. Have we got any more questions, Jenny?
Yeah, there's 2 questions that I'm going to very clumsily try and bring together. So there's one about taking lessons from the work of Mary to challenge the public sector pay cap. And then there's also a question about gender pensions gap, which is over 42%, and how we tackle that serious equality. And I know they're both quite broad, but it's just trying to get through as many questions as possible.
Thank you. Mary, would you like to kick off on this one?
I have to go quite quickly. I've got another event at 8:30. Sorry, I thought we were finishing there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to apologise, and I'm really sorry that I have to go before I can finish the panel, because I wanted to, because my great friend Louise Regan is there. I can see her with the wonderful flowers behind, and of course Louise is our equalities officer at the NEU, and she's a fantastic advocate for women and for all the equality strand at the NEU. She never ever, she's fearless in bringing our attention, our focused attention to equalities in the NEU. So I'm sorry that I won't be able to hear her, and I'm sorry I can't stay to answer your question, but I've got some media work to do, and I've just got to get ready for a pre-record for Channel 4. So would you excuse me, and can I give my apologies now?
Absolutely, Mary, and thank you for giving us some very inspirational comments. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you're not going to forget us.
No, not at all.
Mary Macarthur events, well and truly established. Many thanks, Mary.
Thank you, now.
Lots of luck.
Thank you.
Right, Sarah, would you like to make some response?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the work of Mary Macarthur challenging the public sector pay cap, I think she would have been leading from the front, most definitely. We've seen the shocking insult this week from Boris and the Chancellor and all the rest of them in terms of the 1% for the NHS. They call them heroes, and I'll just quote, and I can't remember for the life of me, so I do apologise. No offence meant to the person who said it, but they are heroes, but they are also very highly skilled, qualified people who deserve the pay that they should be entitled to. And actually, it is a pay cut because the forecast for the forthcoming year is 1.5% inflation. So a 1% pay increase isn't a pay increase. And obviously, the public sector that have kept the country going, from bin workers to teaching assistants, from teachers to carers, they've all kept this country going. And I'm sure, as we've all heard, Mary was media savvy. She would have been all over it. And I think one lesson we can take from that is that we need to get this message out as well. We're not going to have any favours from the right-wing mainstream media. We need to take matters into our own hands, have those conversations on social media as is a dream for trade unionists in the 21st century, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Zoom meetings like this one tonight and Twitter, etc. Just getting that message out there and reminding people that their vote matters on May the 6th as well. Thank you, Sarah. Cathy, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Just very briefly, Mary Macarthur is good at shaming employers and politicians into making sure that their promises weren't broken and that they did what was needed to ensure that women were protected. Particularly, Mary Macarthur did so during the First World War, so that, you know, politicians, Lloyd George apparently was didn't get on with Mary Macarthur, is I think that a bit of an understatement. They didn't get on with each other perhaps, but she was powerful, she would argue it, and everybody really needed her in their corner. So I totally agree with Sarah. You know, yes, she was a force to be reckoned with, and she would not have rested until these issues were absolutely nailed.
Well, Frances O'Grady said, you know, that Mary Macarthur was a smart campaigner. I think we've proved tonight that we've got some smart campaigners amongst the trade union organisation here as well. The clock is ticking, and therefore it's very important before we finish that I ask Louise to say a few words. Louise is chair of the Midlands TUC, and as you heard from Mary, she stole some of my lines there, Louise. It doesn't matter. She is the National Equality Officer for the NEU. Louise.
Oh, thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you to everyone. I mean, it has been such an empowering evening. I've been teaching all week. I was exhausted, and the thought of a Friday night meeting, it didn't fill me with pleasure, but to be in a room full of women is very empowering, and hearing all of your voices has really perked me up this evening. Actually, it's been quite a challenging week, and the references to Sarah Everard already, I fully support all those that stand with her family and send condolences. What a shameful event. And we saw during lockdown huge increases in domestic abuse and violence against our sisters, and we know we have made huge gains in the trade union movement and in women's equality, but we have not made enough. And for every woman that is injured or dies at the hands of someone, we have to speak out and stand up. And so, you know, as I say, Mary was an amazing woman, and we have much to learn from her. I'm very lucky. Mary Bousted, as you've heard, is a fantastic advocate for our union and a leader for our union, but we've heard some fantastic women speakers here tonight, and I, you know, stand in awe of Sarah James, who does fantastic work in her union. Very privileged to be here with her. But Cathy, I've just ordered your book. I'm looking forward to reading it. It looks amazing, and I just want to continue learning more. But I think I'll sort of end with what Sarah said, the issues, her 3 E's, and you know, you talked about the 3 R's, Sylvia, and I'm, as an educator, not sure I'm so obsessed with the 3 R's, although I love to read and to be able to read and learn for themselves. But, you know, our education has to change. Our education system has to change. So we're educating our children and young people about the things we've just talked about. And I know there's a fantastic resource about the chain makers. We should promote that and get that out there into our settings. But we have to educate them about trade unions, about their rights, about them as workers, but also about the fact that people have a right to a life. Life isn't all about work. You know, you work, but you have a right to a life. And too many people now are tied into this poverty work system, which means that they're working too many hours and have no life. And we have to do that. And we do that through the empowerment and the engagement. So I thank Sarah for raising those 3 E's. I'm going to be using those, and I think we should all be using them. But thank you all so much. It's been such a powerful event. I feel so empowered now. And we have a vigil tomorrow for Sarah Everard, and I'm looking forward to going there, to standing with other sisters and to speaking out again tomorrow. And I'm sure lots of you will be doing that as well. So thank you so much. And thank you, Sylvia, for chairing. Thank you, Jen, for your wonderful questioning. And it's been very lovely to be with all of you.
Thank you, Louise, for that. And I think I would add mine, and I'm sure on behalf of everybody who's participating in this event this evening, our condolences to Sarah's family. Before I close, I do want to express my personal thanks to the Midlands TUC and to all the affiliated unions, to the Friends of the Women Chainmakers, for their support in ensuring that these events continue each year. We now have 3 events a year. The inaugural, the lectures in March, which usually coincides with International Women's Day, the festival in July, and in November, the presentation of the Mary Macarthur Award for Equality. That wouldn't have happened had it not been for support of the trade union movement. We've rescued Mary and the Women Chainmakers and made sure that they are centre stage. And that's due to a lot of support and a lot of help from people who are making sure they will not be forgotten. They're not going to be airbrushed out of history. They are our working class heroes and heroines, and we're going to make sure that they're remembered. And amongst the people who have been listening tonight, and there are many, I have to say, are 2 people who have been regulars at this event. One of them is Stephanie Peacock, used to be a GMB political officer, and now the Member of Parliament for Barnsley. And also in the audience this evening is Sarah Boston. And Sarah was the filmmaker who made that incredible documentary on the Women Chainmakers from back. She made it in 1973. She captured the expressions of the women who actually participated in that strike. It's a unique piece of filming. If you haven't seen it already, please do see it. It's available, I understand, as well as everywhere else with the TUC, it's available on YouTube. I guess that's inevitable in the present times, but it is there. It has to be seen. If you've seen it already, watch it again. It's an inspiration. Thank you all for attending, for coming. And once again, my sincere thanks to the Midlands TUC and all the trade unionists for making this a very special event. Many thanks. Bye-bye.